The colony stretched deep under the ground like a giant hive. Endless tunnels connected small rooms where humanoids lived, worked, and slept. The air was always heavy with the sound of machines and the dull humming of vents that pushed recycled air through the walls. The lights never changed, always the same pale white glow, so no one ever knew if it was day or night outside. Rian sat on the edge of his small bed and stared at the ceiling. He had lived in the colony his whole life, but still, something inside him felt restless. Every day was the same. Wake up when the alarm rang, walk to the work hall, carry out the tasks given by the overseers, then return to his room. He often wondered why no one was allowed beyond the tall steel gates that sealed the colony from the outside world. Stories about the wild surface were whispered between the young, but never spoken loudly. Some said the land above was nothing but wasteland, filled with storms and creatures that could swallow a humanoid whole. Others said there were colors and skies so vast they made you feel small. But the overseers taught only one thing, that the colony was safety, and outside was certain death. Rian was not satisfied with such answers. His thoughts often drifted toward the idea of open air and stars. He had never seen either, but he could imagine them, endless and free. The more he thought about it, the more the walls around him felt like chains. On that particular day, Rian walked slowly through one of the long corridors that led to the work hall. Rows of other humanoids walked beside him, heads lowered, silent as always. The overseers, standing tall in their dark armor, watched every step. No one dared to speak under their gaze. In the work hall, Rian was given the same job as usual, moving boxes filled with tools and parts for the machines. The hall echoed with clanks and rattles, yet the silence between workers was stronger than the noise. Everyone obeyed. Everyone kept their thoughts hidden. But Rian could not keep his thoughts hidden forever. He noticed another worker across the hall, a girl named Mira, who often glanced around with the same searching eyes he had. She looked at the overseers with quiet dislike, and at the gate doors with something close to longing. When the overseers were distracted, Rian moved closer to her. "Do you ever wonder what is outside?" he asked in a low whisper. Myra froze for a moment, then lowered her voice even more. "Of course I wonder, but if anyone hears us, we are finished." Rian nodded, but there was a small spark of relief in his chest. He was not alone in his thoughts. Later that night, in the narrow sleeping quarters, Rian lay awake, listening to the endless hum of the vents. Sleep would not come. His mind kept circling the same idea: the outside, the wild, the forbidden's gate. He imagined walking under open skies, feeling air that had never passed through a vent, touching ground that was not made of steel. The thought filled him with a strange mix of fear and excitement. The next day, during a routine power shift, the lights flickered for a moment. It was not the first time, but each flicker reminded Rian that even the overseer's perfect system was not unbreakable. If the lights could fail, maybe the rules could fail too. Rian's curiosity soon pushed him farther. At the end of the work cycle, instead of returning straight to his room, he slipped quietly down a side corridor. He walked until he reached the farthest section of the colony, where the giant steel gate stood. It was tall, covered in locks, and guarded at all hours. The gate had always been a symbol of fear to others, but to Rian, it was a symbol of possibility. As he watched from the shadows, he noticed someone else already standing near the corner of the wall. It was Tovin, another worker, known for his strong build and quiet nature. Rian's heart raced as he realized that Tovin too was staring at the gate, lost in thought. "Do you think we could ever step through it?" Rian whispered. Tovin looked at him with surprise, then gave a small shake of his head. "It is forbidden. The hunters would bring us back." "But don't you wonder?" Rian pressed. Tovin did not answer right away. He finally said, "Yes, but wondering is dangerous." Dangerous or not, the thought could not be erased now. 3 of them, Rian, Myra, and Tovin, each carried the same restless fire inside. In a world where obedience was survival, the 3 had begun to feel something new hope. That night, Rian dreamed of walking under a sky filled with lights. He did not know if the lights were real stars or only shapes his mind invented, but they felt more alive than anything in the colony. When he woke, the heavy ceiling pressed down on him harder than ever before. Something had begun. He did not yet know how, but he understood that his life inside the colony could no longer stay the same. The wild was waiting, and one day he would face it. The steel gate stood like a mountain at the edge of the colony. It stretched high to the ceiling and was locked with thick chains and glowing locks that hummed with hidden power. For most humanoids, the gate was only a reminder of rules. For Rian, Myra, and Tovin, it was a door waiting to be opened. Rian returned often to look at it from the shadows. He never dared to step too close, for overseers guarded the area, tall and silent in their black armor. Their faces were hidden under masks, and their hands always rested on their long weapons. Anyone who moved too near the gate was punished, and no one dared to test the law. But curiosity burned inside Rian like fire. He had spoken more with Myra since their first whispered words in the work hall. At night, when the overseer's rounds grew lighter, they met in narrow corners where the machines roared loud enough to hide their voices. There must be more than these walls, Rian told her one night. Why else would they keep us locked away? Myra's eyes shone with quiet determination. They fear what is outside, or maybe they fear what will happen if we see it. Either way, I want to know the truth. Tovin joined them days later. At first, he was reluctant. He was stronger than most, and his size often drew the overseer's notice. He had always believed survival meant silence and obedience. But as the days passed, even Tovin admitted that the thought of the outside pulled at him like an unseen force. Together, the 3 began to watch the guards more carefully. They noticed that during food distribution, the guards were more distracted. They also discovered that when the power lines flickered, the glowing locks on the gate dimmed slightly, though only for a short moment. "We will never have a perfect chance," Myra whispered during one of their secret talks. "But if the lights fail again, even for a moment, we must act." Rian nodded. His heart beat faster each time they spoke of it, but fear never fully left him. The wild was unknown. The overseers always claimed it was filled with storms and beasts, yet if it was only danger, why keep it hidden with such effort? Something did not fit. One evening, as the colony buzzed with its routine work, a sudden alarm echoed through the tunnels. The lights above flickered again, this time longer than before. Workers froze in place, uncertain whether to move or stay. Overseers shouted commands, running to check the power lines. Rian looked at Myra, then at Tovin. This was the moment. Without a word, the 3 slipped out of the work hall and rushed toward the far corridor. Their footsteps pounded against the metal floor as their hearts raced with fear and excitement. The gate loomed ahead, darker than usual as the glowing locks blinked weakly. The overseers who usually guarded the area had left to respond to the alarm. For the first time, the gate stood unguarded. "Now," Myra whispered. They pushed against the heavy chains, testing them. The locks still glowed faintly, but they were weaker. Tovin gritted his teeth and pulled with all his strength. The chains rattled and sparks crackled across the locks. Rian used a piece of sharp metal he had hidden from the work hall to strike against the lock. To his shock, the flicker in the power caused it to loosen. With a sudden snap, the lock broke free. The gate creaked as they pushed it. Cold air rushed in, so sharp and fresh that it stung their lungs. Rian's eyes widened. It was unlike the recycled air of the colony. It carried the smell of earth. Damp and raw. Beyond the gate was darkness, but not the kind of darkness they knew underground. This darkness stretched endlessly, filled with faint points of silver. Light above, Rian stopped for a breath, staring upward. The sky, the stars. He had dreamed of them, but dreams had never captured their true depth. For a moment, all three stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sight. Then shouts echoed behind them. Overseers had noticed the broken lock. The sound of boots and weapons rang. Through the corridor. "We must go," Tovin urged. They stepped through the gate, and the steel slammed behind them as alarms roared. The overseers' voices grew louder, but already the three were running. Their feet touched soil for the first time in their lives. The ground was uneven, soft in some places, hard in others, and it seemed alive beneath them. The night air wrapped around them, cool and filled with strange scents. The silver light of the stars lit their path faintly, but far away. Strange cries echoed from the unseen wild. They had escaped the colony, but freedom did not feel safe. It felt dangerous, vast, and uncertain. As they climbed a small ridge just beyond the gate, they looked back one last time. The colony lights glowed from underground vents, and the overseers were gathering at the open gate, shouting into the wild. But the three fugitives were already gone, swallowed by the darkness. Of the surface, Rian's chest heaved as he tried to catch his breath. He looked at Myra and Tovin. "There is no turning back now," he said. Myra's face was pale, yet her eyes were steady. "Good. Let us see what the wild holds." The unknown stretched before them, both terrifying and beautiful. For the first time in their lives, they were free, and every step forward was a step into a world no overseer controlled. The surface world stretched endlessly around them. For the first time, Rian, Myra, and Tovin walked under a sky without a ceiling. The stars glittered far above, and a faint silver glow from a half-moon lit the land. They stood still for a while, unable to believe their eyes. The air was sharp and alive, filled with scents they could not name. It carried the smell of soil, damp leaves, and something wild that made their hearts beat faster. Rian bent down and touched the ground. It was soft in some places and rough in others, not smooth like the steel floors of the colony. His hands came away dusty, and he held the earth in his palm as if it were treasure. Myra stepped closer to a patch of tall grass, brushing her fingers across its blades. The grass bent and swayed in the wind, whispering softly. She smiled for the first time since they left. "This place is alive," she whispered. Tovin, standing tall, scanned the shadows around them. The land was beautiful, but it was also unknown. "We cannot stand here too long. The overseers may follow." They moved forward, walking into the forest that rose just beyond the ridge. The trees towered high, their branches thick with leaves that rustled in the night breeze. The sounds of insects chirping and distant calls of unseen creatures filled the air. To the trio, the forest seemed both welcoming and threatening. As they walked deeper, the canopy above blocked much of the starlight. Strange glowing plants clung to the bark, lighting their path faintly. Mira paused to study one of them. She touched a leaf, and it glowed brighter for a moment, like a soft lantern. "These plants carry their own light," she said with wonder. "I never knew such things could exist." Rian looked at her and then at the forest. "We were told the surface was nothing but danger, yet it feels beautiful." But the wild soon reminded them that beauty and danger could exist together. A distant roar rolled through the night, deep and powerful. The ground trembled slightly under their feet. All three froze, their eyes wide. "What was that?" Rian whispered. Tovin's jaw tightened. "A beast, a large one." They continued moving, quieter now, stepping carefully between roots and stones. Every sound in the forest seemed louder: the snapping of branches, the call of birds, the rustle of animals in the undergrowth. Rian's heart pounded. He realized the colony, though a prison, had at least been predictable. Here, every moment was uncertain. As the night stretched on, hunger began to press against them. They had escaped quickly and carried no food. Myra studied the glowing plants again, breaking off a piece of a small fruit-like pod that grew near the ground. She sniffed it, then touched it to her tongue carefully. "It is bitter," she said, "but it does not burn." "I think it may be safe," Tovin frowned, "or it may kill us slowly." Mira broke the pod into 3 pieces. "We have no choice. Without food, we cannot walk far." They ate small bites, just enough to keep moving. The taste was sharp and unpleasant, but it gave them strength. Rian was grateful, even though worry stayed in the back of his mind. Suddenly, a snapping of branches echoed nearby. Something large moved through the trees. They crouched low behind a fallen log, holding their breath. From the shadows emerged a creature taller than any of them. It walked on 4 legs, its eyes glowing faintly yellow in the dark. Its body was covered in rough scales, and each step it took made the ground shake. The beast sniffed the air, its breath heavy and loud. Rian's muscles froze with fear. Mira gripped his arm tightly, while Tovin reached for a sharp rock, ready to defend them if needed. The creature paused, its head turning toward their hiding place. Its glowing eyes pierced the darkness. For a moment, Rian thought it had seen them. His heart thudded so hard, he was sure the beast could hear it. But then, with a low growl, it turned away and lumbered deeper into the forest. They stayed hidden until the sound of its footsteps faded. Only then did they breathe again. "That was too close," Myra whispered, her voice trembling. Tovin clenched his jaw. "This land is not safe, but it is better than chains. At least here, danger comes from the world, not from overseers." Rian nodded. "And we are together. That is our strength." The 3 pressed onward until they reached a small clearing. Exhaustion weighed on them, and they decided to rest. They gathered dry branches and, with stones, Rian struck sparks until a small fire came to life. The warmth spread quickly, and the firelight pushed back the shadows. As they sat close to the fire, listening to the far sounds, they felt a mixture of fear and wonder. The wild was vast, filled with creatures and secrets, but it was also real and alive in ways the colony never had been. Mira stared at the flames. "The overseers told us the wild meant death. But this," she lifted her gaze to the sky, where stars glimmered above the trees. "This feels like life." Rian followed her gaze, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly free. The colony was behind them, the wild ahead, and their journey had only begun. The morning light broke slowly across the forest. Rian, Mira, and Tovin woke to a world painted in soft colors they had never seen before. The sun rose over the trees, casting golden rays through the branches. For the first time, they saw the forest in daylight. The leaves glistened with dew, the sky stretched wide and blue, and distant birds flew together in graceful patterns. Rian stood in silence, staring upward. The sun warmed his face, and the sky seemed endless. He whispered, "So much space. It feels like the world has no walls." Mira smiled faintly as she rubbed her hands together for warmth. "It feels alive, but we must learn to live in it. The wild is beautiful, but it is not safe." Tovin's stomach growled loudly, reminding them of their need. "Food first," he said firmly. "If we do not eat, we cannot walk far." The 3 set out, searching for something more than bitter, roots or glowing pods. They followed a stream that flowed gently between mossy stones. Clear water sparkled in the sunlight. Rian knelt, cupped his hands, and drank deeply. The water was cool and refreshing, better than anything recycled in the colony. Myra and Tovin drank too, their thirst eased for now. As they walked along the stream, Myra pointed to small fish darting beneath the surface. If we could catch one, it would feed us. Tovin studied the water and picked up a sharp branch, shaping it with a stone into a rough spear. He waded into the stream, moving slowly so the fish would not scatter too quickly. Rian and Mira watched anxiously. After several tries, Tovin struck down, and to their surprise, he lifted a wriggling fish from the water. They cheered softly, a spark of joy breaking their fear. Tovin smiled for the first time. The wild may test us, but it will also provide. By the fire, they cooked the fish carefully. The taste was unlike anything they had known, rich, smoky, and satisfying. For the first time since their escape, their hunger lessened. It gave them new strength, and with it, hope. But the wild never let them forget its danger. That night, as they rested near the fire, a deep growl echoed from the shadows. The hairs on Rian's neck stood up. From between the trees, two glowing eyes appeared, followed by the hulking shape of a beast. Its body was covered with fur marked by dark stripes, and its teeth shone white as it snarled. The three froze. The fire crackled between them and the beast, the only barrier keeping it back. "We cannot run," Tovin whispered. "It will chase." Mira's hands trembled as she grabbed a burning branch from the fire. "Then we fight." Rian followed her lead, pulling another burning branch free. Tovin gripped his spear tightly. The beast stepped closer, its breath hot and heavy. With a sudden roar, it lunged forward. Rian swung the fire toward its face. The flame startled it, making it pause for a moment. Tovin thrust his spear, striking its side. The beast roared louder, furious now, but it backed away from the fire. Mira shouted and waved her branch wildly, sparks flying. Together, they pressed forward, forcing the creature back. Finally, with a snarl, the beast turned and vanished into the trees. Silence returned, but their hearts pounded hard. Rian's chest heaved as he lowered his branch. "We drove it away," he said, almost in disbelief. Tovin dropped to one knee, exhausted. "If not for the fire, it would have killed us." Myra's voice was firm, though her hand still shook. "Then fire is our weapon." "Fire is our weapon. We must never be without it." The three sat back down, shaken but alive. In that moment, they realized they had changed. In the colony, they would have been helpless. But here, in the wild, they had fought back and won. Days passed, and they learned more with each step. They discovered berries that were safe to eat, though some left a sour taste. They built shelters of branches and leaves to shield themselves from rain. Tovin grew skilled with the spear. Rian learned to strike sparks faster, and Mira studied plants carefully, remembering which ones healed small cuts and which ones burned the skin. They argued sometimes, especially when fear was heavy, but each night they came back together around the fire. Survival was not easy, but each challenge made them stronger. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and red, they sat quietly watching the sky. Birds flew across the horizon, and the world felt wide and endless. Rian broke the silence. "We have lived our whole lives believing we could not survive outside, but here we are." Tovin nodded. "We are not weak. We are not helpless. We are more than what the overseers made us." Mira looked at them both, her eyes steady. "Then we must keep moving. The wild is not the end. It is the beginning." The fire crackled, the stars appeared, and the forest whispered around them. They knew the path ahead would bring greater dangers, but they also knew something even greater. They were no longer prisoners. They were survivors. Far beneath the surface, the overseers gathered in their command hall. The broken lock on the great gate was still sparking when the hunters were called. These hunters were not ordinary workers. They were tall, fast, and trained only to track and capture those who dared to defy the rules. With weapons strapped to their backs and hounds at their sides, they prepared to bring back the fugitives. Above, in the wild, Rian, Mira, and Tovin had no idea how close danger was. They had spent several days learning to survive, moving deeper into the forest, believing distance would keep them safe. But on the fourth night, while they rested near their fire, Rian thought he heard something unusual. It was faint at first, like the crack of a branch, but steady and purposeful. He looked into the darkness, uneasy. The next morning, while following a narrow path between cliffs, they found tracks on the ground. Not the paw prints of beasts, but heavy boot marks pressed deep into the soil. Rian knelt beside them, his chest tightening. "These are not animals," he said. "The overseers are following." Mira crouched beside him, her face pale. "Hunters." Tovin clenched his fists. "Then we must keep moving. If they catch us, all this will be for nothing." They hurried along the path, but the forest seemed to grow heavier with every step. The sound of distant hounds barking carried through the air, faint but real. The hunters were closing in. By evening, they reached a rushing river. The water foamed and crashed against rocks, making it dangerous to cross. Behind them, the barking grew louder. They had little choice. "We must cross," Rian said firmly. The current was strong. The water pushed at their bodies, threatening to sweep them away. Tovin took the lead, steadying himself against the rocks and helping Mira and Rian across. When they finally reached the other side, soaked and trembling, they collapsed on the shore. But already, hounds barked from the far bank. The hunters had found their trail. That night, the three climbed into a cave hidden among the cliffs. They huddled together in silence, listening to the distant calls of the hounds. Every sound seemed sharper, every shadow a threat. Rian stared at the flickering fire they had built. "They will not stop until we are caught," he whispered. Myra's eyes shone in the firelight. "Then we must be smarter than them. The wild has tested us, and we survived. Now it will help us again." The next day, they moved carefully, leaving false trails. They dragged branches behind them to cover their tracks and waded through streams to hide their scent. The hounds still barked in the distance, but sometimes the sound faded. It gave them hope, though fear never left. At one point, the hunters grew so close that the three fugitives could hear their voices through the trees. Harsh commands echoed in the strange metallic tones of the overseers' helmets. The fugitives lay flat in the grass, not daring to move. A hound passed so near that Rian could see its teeth glint in the sun. His breath stopped in his throat, but the hunters moved on, fooled by the false trail. That evening, the three climbed high onto rocky ground where the forest thinned. From the ridge, they could see far in every direction. The view was breathtaking, endless. Mountains, rivers, and valleys stretching under the fading sun. Yet the beauty could not ease their worry. Smoke rose in the distance where the hunters had set campfires. "They are many," Tovin said quietly, "and we are only three." "But we are not weak," Myra replied. "We have something they do not. We are free." Rian looked at the horizon. His heart pounded with both fear and determination. "If we must fight, we will. But first, we must learn the land better. The wild can hide us if we trust it." The days turned into a restless game of chase. The fugitives moved swiftly through forests, across streams, and up jagged hills. The hunters followed, never far behind. Sometimes the three escaped by minutes, sometimes by seconds. They learned to travel in silence, to read the signs of animals, and to use the land as a shield. One night, when the stars shone bright overhead, Rian sat awake while Myra and Tovin slept. He listened to the forest and the Faint cries of hunters far away. A thought grew inside him. The wild was not only testing them, it was shaping them. Each trial made them stronger, sharper, more alive. He whispered to himself, "We are not the same as when we left the colony. We are becoming something new." By dawn, the hunters' voices grew louder again, and the fugitives had to run once more. But this time, as they vanished into the forest shadows, there was no despair in their steps. Fear still pressed on them, yet alongside it burned a stronger fire, the will to stay free. The wild stretched on for many days as Rian, Mira, and Tovin kept moving. The hunters were never far behind, and the sound of their hounds echoed through the valleys. The three fugitives grew thinner and weary, but their resolve burned stronger. With each step, one afternoon, while following a stream deeper into the forest, Myra noticed something strange. The trees gave way to broken stone walls, half buried under moss and vines. Towering arches rose into the sky, cracked but still standing. The ruins of a forgotten place spread across the ground, silent and mysterious. "What is this?" Rian whispered as he touched a stone carving, worn by time. "Others must have lived here long ago," Myra said. "Perhaps even before the colony was built." The ruins gave them shelter. They hid among the crumbling walls, resting their tired legs. Tovin ran his hands along the stones, studying their strange markings. "Whoever lived here was strong," he said. "Stronger than us, but they are gone now. The wild has taken their place." Before they could wonder further, the distant call of hounds broke the silence. The hunters had closed in. The fugitives had little choice but to prepare. "We cannot keep running forever," Rian said. His eyes burned with determination. "Here, we make our stand." Myra's face was pale, but she nodded. "If the hunters wish to take us, they will have to fight harder than ever." Tovin tightened his grip on his spear. "The ruins will shield us. We can use them as traps." Together, they worked quickly. Rian piled stones near narrow passages, ready to push them down when the hunters advanced. Myra gathered dry branches, preparing fires to blind the hounds. Tovin sharpened his spear and set wooden stakes in hidden corners. Their hands trembled, but their will was firmed out as night fell. The hunters arrived. Torches glowed in the dark, and the metallic sound of boots echoed across the ruins. The overseers barked commands, their hounds snarling and pulling at their chains. The three fugitives crouched behind the broken walls, hearts racing. The first hound charged into the ruins, its eyes glowing in the firelight. Mira hurled a burning branch, and the beast yelped, retreating in fear. Two hunters followed, weapons drawn. Rian shoved the pile of stones, sending them crashing down. Dust filled the air, and the hunters stumbled back. Tovin leapt forward with his spear, striking at another hound. The beast snapped its jaws, but the sharp tip cut across its shoulder, forcing it back. The ruins shook with noise shouts, growls, and the clash of stone against metal dot. The overseers pushed harder, sending more hunters into the ruins. Arrows whistled through the air, striking the stones near Rian's head. He ducked low, sweat running down his face. For a moment, fear gripped him, but then Myra's voice cut through. "Stand firm. The wild is with us." Her words gave him strength. He lit another branch, waving it high, and the flames danced against the night. The hunters slowed, wary of the fire. Tovin swung his spear with fierce power, forcing them to keep their distance. But the fight was not easy. The hunters were many, and they pressed in from all sides. The ruins trembled under the struggle, old stones falling and dust rising. Just when it seemed the fugitives might be surrounded, the sky opened with a storm. Lightning flashed across the clouds, and thunder rolled like a mighty drum. Rain poured down, washing fire and smoke across the ruins. The storm was wild, fierce, and untamed. and it struck both sides without mercy. The hunters staggered as the ground turned to mud. Their torches died in the rain, leaving them blind in the darkness. The hounds whined, pulling back in fear of the thunder. Rian, Myra, and Tovin clung to the broken walls, soaked to the bone, yet alive. The storm shielded them, breaking the hunters' strength. Lightning struck a nearby tree, and flames roared through the branches. The hunters cried out, retreating from the blaze. "Now!" Tovin shouted over the storm. "They are breaking!" The three pressed forward with all their strength. Fire, mud, and falling stone became their weapons. The hunters, unable to hold their ground, pulled back into the night. Their voices faded, swallowed by the storm. At last, silence returned. The rain eased, and the ruins stood quiet again. Rian collapsed against a wall, chest heaving. Myra dropped beside him, trembling, but smiling faintly. Tovin leaned on his spear, his face streaked with rain and ash. "We fought them," Rian whispered. "And we won." Myra looked at the broken stones around them. "Not just us. The wild fought with us. It does not belong to the overseers. It belongs to itself." Tovin nodded slowly. "And we belong to it now." The storm passed, leaving the ruins glowing faintly in the moonlight. The three fugitives sat together, bruised and weary, but alive. For the first time, they felt not only like survivors, but like warriors. The great trial had tested them, and they had endured. Whatever lay ahead, they knew they would face it together. The ruins stood silent after the storm. Broken walls dripped with rain, and the ashes of fallen trees still smoked in the distance. Rian, Myra, and Tovin huddled together in the shadows, their bodies tired but their spirits stronger than ever. They had faced the hunters, and they had survived. Yet they knew this was not the end. The overseers would return, and this time they would come with greater numbers. "We cannot stay here," Myra said as dawn broke, her voice steady though her face was pale. "The hunters will track us again. If we remain, the ruins will become our prison." Rian nodded. He looked out at the forest, where the mist curled between tall trees. "We must go deeper, beyond the reach of their hounds, beyond the places they fear to enter." Tovin tapped his spear on the wet stones. "And if we go deeper, we may find what the overseers themselves could not: freedom." The three set off once more, leaving the ruins behind. The forest grew wilder. With each step, the trees stretched higher, the rivers roared louder, and the air grew heavy with the cries of unseen creatures. It was dangerous, but it was also alive. Unlike the cages of the colony, the wild demanded respect, not obedience. Days passed as they pushed onward. They faced hunger when food grew scarce. They fought exhaustion when their legs threatened to fail. Yet they learned to work with the land. Mira discovered plants that could be eaten without harm. Tovin used his strength to fish from rushing streams. Rian studied the tracks of animals and guided them away from danger. Slowly, the wild began to feel less like an enemy and more like an ally. One evening, as they rested near a waterfall, Rian stared at the endless forest stretching before them. "All my life," he said, "I thought the overseers were unbreakable. But now I see they are afraid. Afraid of this world. Afraid of what we might become if we break free. They keep using cages because they fear us," Mira added. Her eyes shone with a quiet fire. "And we proved tonight that they should." Tovin raised his spear and planted it firmly in the earth. "Then we must never return to chains. Even if the hunters come again, we will stand. We will fight. We will live free." The others nodded, and a silent bond grew stronger between them. Their journey led them at last to a place unlike any they had seen before. The trees opened into a wide valley filled with strange glowing plants and rivers that shimmered under the stars. Towering cliffs rose on both sides, guarding the valley like stone giants. For the first time since their escape, they felt truly hidden from the overseers. "This place," Myra whispered. "It feels safe. It feels alive." But safety was not certain. On the far side of the valley, they discovered more ruins larger and older than the ones they had left behind. Great stone towers leaned against the cliffs, half buried but still standing proud. Carvings of figures stretched across the walls, their faces strange but noble. Rian touched one of the carvings. Who were they? He wondered aloud. Perhaps, Tovin said slowly, they were like us. Perhaps they also fled from chains long ago. The thought filled them with hope. If others had lived free in this land before, perhaps they too could build a life away from the overseer's reach. Yet, hope came with a shadow. At night, distant horns echoed through the valley. The hunters were still searching. Their torches burned like angry stars on the horizon. "We cannot let them follow us here," Myra said firmly. "If they find this place, they will destroy it just as they destroyed our peace before." Rian clenched his fists. "Then we will end it. This must be the last chase." The next day, the three prepared. They set traps along the narrow paths that led into the valley. They gathered stones and branches, turning them into weapons. They studied the cliffs and rivers, learning how to use the land to their advantage. They were no longer fugitives hiding in fear. They were defenders, ready to fight for the freedom they had claimed. When the hunters finally entered the valley, they were met not by prey, but by warriors. The traps snapped, the stones rained down, and fire spread through the dry grass. Rian led the charge, striking with fierce courage. Mira's sharp eyes guided them through the chaos, and Tovin's strength held the line against the hounds. The valley itself seemed to rise in their defense. The cliff shook loose rocks that crashed upon the hunters. The rivers swelled with sudden rain, sweeping some away. The wild was no longer an enemy, and had become their ally. At last, the overseer's force broke. The hunters, beaten and bloodied, fled back into the forest. The fugitives stood tall, their chests heaving, their eyes blazing with triumph. "We have done it," Myra whispered, her voice trembling with relief. "The wild is ours now." Rian looked at the valley, glowing under the stars. "No, it does not belong to us. We belong to it. And that is what makes us free." Tovin raised his spear high, and the three stood together in the moonlight. They were no longer captives, no longer prey. They were the first to escape, and in their victory, they had opened a path for others who still lived in chains. A spark had been lit, and soon it would grow into a fire no overseer could ever contain.